Also, you guys, please remind me to record because I'll forget every time. So if you guys don't remind me, I will forget. We are recording now, so at least we get this portion of the lecture going forward recorded. But if we think back to last week's conversation, right? The purpose of that conversation was to provide you guys an contextualized ontology. And ontology is just a philosophical term for how one understands itself, right? So I provided you guys a contextualized ontological understanding of African people, right? Going back to ancient African times, dealing with the society of Kemet, some individuals that were produced from that society, uh, Imhotep, Narmer, Akhenaten, right? They're all part of this Kemetic society that produced these type of readings and these type of philosophies, right? So if we think about what we're doing in this class, we're investigating notions of governmentality, we're investigating notions of society, um, and we're investigating notions of equality, right? Another component of this course is the Constitution, right? So how are laws and norms produced on paper to kind of guide society, right? You can get no fundamental when it comes to thoughts being produced on paper to guide society than what we read within this text, right? So couple of things to not to kind of give you some insight as to when this text was made public to the world. Mansour E. Pressy de Avinis, who was responsible for the excavation. So they were just the ones who were able to go into the temples of Kemet. When I say Kemet, I'm just talking about Egypt, and get the information out of the temples. During that excavation, they found the teachings of Ptah-hotep. This is one of two texts that they found. The first one was incomplete. The second one is what you guys read for today's discussion, right? He gave the papyrus to the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. So once he found these documents, he dedicated them to the library in Paris, and that was done in 1847. So these texts became public in 1847, and they were made public through the Bibliothèque des Nationales of France, so the National Library of France. And E. Pressy de Avinis is the one who was able to excavate them and place them in the France libraries. So a little bit about Ptah-hotep. It was said that he was about 110 years old when he wrote this text. He was the eldest legitimate son of an unnamed pharaoh, so they don't really go into who his father was. But what's significant about this? And I want to kind of go back to last week's lecture, and we talked about the Kemetic mystery schools, which essentially was their universities, right? And their sources for higher education. I mentioned just as we have your freshmen, your sophomores, your juniors, your seniors, they had the same hierarchy, but they were called something different. But instead of doing a certain amount of work or certain amount of readings to allow you to go from freshman to sophomore, you had to master a spiritual principle. Does everybody kind of remember that from last week's conversation? Okay, so looking at Ptah-hotep and his experience, because of his training and because of the education that he received, he was en route to become a pharaoh himself, right? But instead he disavowed the throne and he chose to go the life of a priest. That was the vocation that he chose. So in the Kemetic mystery schools, you had two avenues to go to once you get out of your educational system. One was either into politics to serve the secular nature, right? To serve how people interacted with one another, right? To kind of guide the moral of the society. Or you had the option to go into a spiritual practice and become a priest. So everything that you do within that spiritual tradition, within that Kemetic mystery schools, is kind of designed to make you either a politician or someone who deals within spiritual practices, right? So just as in our schools today, you're trained to get a job, right? They're training you to engage either in the act of government or in the act of spirituality and being like the spiritual moral force of the society. One of the reasons why Ptah-hotep came up with these teachings is to develop what is called Meter Nefer, right? And the original, what we call hieroglyphics, or what the Greeks called hieroglyphics, the actual terminology is Meter Neter, right? But what Ptah-hotep was concerned with was Meter Nefer, and that is the act of good speech, right? So when we speak to one another, we speak to one another in a way that is positive, that is uplifting, that builds one up and not tears one down, right? So this is the concern that Ptah-hotep was dealing with when he produced this text, was to get individuals in a place to engage in Meter Nefer, good speech, right? Let's see what else. So it also mentions in the introduction that Meter Neter was Africa and the world's oldest written system, right? So not only in Africa, but in the world, the Meter Neter was the oldest written system, right? And what they say is important is that there is no developmental period on record of the Meter Neter, right? So what does that mean, that there was no developmental period for this type of language? What does that mean? So what does it mean to be under development, in the process of being developed? What does that mean?
Made, it's still being constructed.
Still being constructed, absolutely, Daniel. So if the book is saying that the Meter Neter, there is no record of it being constructed, what does that mean?
Mean that it was constructed before written word.
Exactly. So essentially that it was produced, fully put together, right? So there is no record of them coming up with the system. There's no record of them creating the system. There's no record of them imagining the system. When they started to look at this, it was already put together science. It was already a put together language, right? So this shows you, and this is what they're saying and what they're arguing in the book, is that this language predates Kemetic society. This language predates Tasseti society, right, which is a neighboring nation state to Kemet. This language predates Nubian society, right? So they're saying that this language is even older than Egypt itself, even older than Kemet itself, right? Because there is no record on file of this language being developed. What else we got? So another thing that I found of interest while reading through the intro. So I did mention one, how Ptah-hotep's desire was to create a system that would allow the Kemetics to engage in Meter Nefer, right, good speech. It was also designed as a litmus test, right, or a set of laws and values that will determine who's able to make it to the afterlife, right? Just how we understand the concept of heaven and hell in a lot of your Christian and Catholic religions, the Kemetics dealt with this idea of the afterlife as well. And these teachings, these instructions that Ptah-hotep laid down was also designed to make sure that the individuals within the society are able to successfully navigate towards the afterlife, right? So I'm gonna read this portion of the introduction to you guys. However, lost to many analysis is the fact that in the preparation for life after death or for the resurrection, the supplicant was actually articulating a set of values and codes of behavior by which to live one's life in the world before death, right? So although it's preparing you for resurrection, although it's preparing you for spiritual ascension, although it's preparing you for the afterlife, this is a set of behaviors to engage in while you're on this earth, right? Y'all with me on that? All right. So no higher human behavioral code has been found anywhere in human history than the earliest code of the ancient Kemetics, right? So this is the highest behavioral code that has been found in world civilization. So think about this class and think about what we're investigating in this class. What is the Constitution meant to do? Why did they come up with the Constitution?
To give us rules to follow to live a better life, at least.
Yeah, to give us a behavioral code, right? It shows how to behave with one another. So what we've just read is the foundations of why they came up with things like constitutions, right? One could also interpret this as the first constitution, right? Hence, it's the oldest book in the world, so therefore it has to be the oldest constitution in the world as well, right? So let's get into to Serena's question. I don't want to read this whole passage, so I'm trying to pick out what's, like, I just read all of it because it's probably give you the best answer. The instructions of Ptah-hotep were copied during the Middle Kingdom on papyri that are still preserved. Some Egyptologists believe that because the instructions were attributed to Ptah-hotep, and because there was indeed an old kingdom sage, and sage is just like a priest, somebody is trained in spiritual practices, right? There's an old, where we at? Because there was indeed an old kingdom sage by that name, Ptah-hotep, and because Middle Kingdom writers attributed the sayings to that sage, who is said to have served under King Asa of the 5th dynasty. Therefore, they should accept the attribution in the absence of compelling evidence to the contrary. Even if it were Middle Kingdom material at the age of the 12th dynasty of approximately 2000 BC. So they're saying, so even if we want to locate this in the Middle Kingdom dynasty, the 12th dynasty, which is around approximately 2000 BC, right? So even if you want to say that this is where we found this text in the time of 2000 BC, the 12th dynasty, right? It would still be the oldest wisdom literature in the world. So even if we say that we found this in 2000 BC, this is still the oldest wisdom producing literature in the world, right? Given a 5th dynastic age, so they're actually able to locate this within the 5th dynasty, we can say that the instructions of Ptah-hotep belong to a period approximately 2,500 years before Christ. So they don't give us an exact date to answer your question, Serena, but they say roughly around 2500 BC is when we can locate or place these teachings. And that's, BC, before Christ. So the 5th dynasty, 2500 BC, roughly, is where we could locate these teachings. Now, realistically speaking, it could be even older than that. That's just how far they were able to trace the text, right? And it doesn't mean that's how old it is. Just if we think about the lecture that we gave last week, as far as how old African people are, right? At one point, they said 3.2 million years old. Then they said, well, upon further investigation, they're actually 7 million years old. And then now we know, because of further investigation, they're actually 8 million years old, right? So the same with this book. They said at first, possibly 2000 BC. As they researched a little bit more, they found it can be traced back as far as 2500 BC. And I would not think it's a beyond imagine to think that it may be even older if they get the opportunity to dig a little deeper. So to answer your question, we don't know. Truthfully, that's probably the most accurate answer. But we can say that it can be traced back as far as 2500 BC. Okay, so those are some of the things I found of interest in the book. Probably for me, what was my favorite passage was probably 12, due to the fact that I'm a father with a son and a daughter, but this passage number 12 speaks specifically on how to raise a son the appropriate way, right? And for me, when I was reading that, that's something that really stuck out to me. One thing I do want to bring to your attention, and if you look at passage 12, it says, he is your son, your ka begot him, right? And that's towards the middle there. Your ka, K-A, that just means your soul. So when you read the ka in the text, that means your soul, right? Anybody familiar with the artist Erykah Badu? Nobody heard of Erykah Badu? Oh shit. Okay. I'm either old or y'all hella young, one of the two, I don't know. But the only reason I bring her up is because the way that she spells her name, I'll put it in the chat. So if you kind of break that name up a little bit, so the reason she spells her name in that fashion, Ka, K-A, is to represent the soul, right? And the Ba in Badu is to represent the spirit, right? So she's pulling from ancient Medu Neter, ancient Kemetic teachings and ancient Kemetic wisdoms in the way that she's using her name and the spelling of her name. All right, so before we jump into Fishbowl, guys have any questions for me, any comments for me, any concerns for me? All right, bet. So is there anybody who wants to volunteer for the Fishbowl?
I can go.
Okay, we have Serena and Cecilia. Give me 1 second. Let me write your guys' name down. Anybody else want to volunteer?
I don't mind participating.
Okay, Daniel and Ashley. Okay, we'll keep it at 4 right now. That's a good number. So remember, Cecilia, Serena, Daniel, Ashley, you guys have one more Fishbowl for the rest of the semester, and you guys are good to go. How it will work, each of you will kind of chime in. You can talk about anything that you find of importance. Once each of the 4 of you go, we'll open it up to an overall class conversation, and we'll go from there. So whoever wants to start it off, it's on you.
So I thought this whole reading was pretty interesting because considering it is like the oldest text of wisdom that we know of is really interesting. And like I've studied the Bible, so some of these things, like some of the things from the Bible really reflect what's in here. And I found it pretty interesting that on number 9, page 22, it says, one has great respect for the silent person, which I find is really true. And it says that when you listen, you should like listen with kindness and not just speak to like boast about yourself and puff yourself up. And in the Bible, it also says that there's power in the tongue, and what you say can lift a person up or break them down. And in Hebrews chapter 12, it says that the tongue of the wise brings healing. So I feel like for like a great leader to bring healing and not just boast about themselves is really important to like lift each other up. And I also thought it was pretty interesting how on number 19, page 25, it says that greed is a compound of all evils. It is a bundle of all hateful things. And I feel that's really true, that you don't want to let greed break up your family, and people kill each other because of greed, because they want more money and they want like their property or their car or their shoes or whatever. Like they kill people for, I don't understand. And then in Hebrews chapter and like the Bible reflects off of that in chapter 13 verse 5, it talks about how you don't covet what other people have because you always have God. Not even if you're like poor or rich, you should just be content that you have God with you always, and don't put your trust in material things because those things will pass away with the earth, and your soul will long endure that if you follow like the teachings. And it surprised me how like similar those teachings are to this one, and I was pretty much shocked, but I found it really interesting. And yeah, I didn't even know about this, but I'm really glad that I read it because it's really cool to know that it was written probably 1,000 years before even the New Testament.
So I'll go,
Go
or
ahead.
can I go, or is it?
Yeah, either way.
Oh, okay. I was never one to like really like study the Bible or anything like you did, Serena. So when I started reading it, I felt that like it was like kind of like what I imagine the Bible would say. So I kind of found it really interesting, and I found it like, like in the beginning it mentioned how like, you get old and you want to pass on like this wisdom, like power, and like it mentions like age and stuff like that. So I just found it interesting. And in the beginning it also mentions how you want to not be arrogant and you want to help the ignorant. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I don't know. And then it also mentions a lot of evil. So when you talk to like other people, it talks about like how if you talk to someone that's like higher than you want to like learn from them. And if you talk to someone that's on the same level as you want to just like, you know, be mutuals. But if they're talking evil, don't intervene with them. And it also mentions how not to dispute the lower. And if you're on any level, I have it written down right here. It mentioned that God will punish accordingly. And yeah, I like that.
Okay, so I really enjoying reading this because I find it very similar to, because I read the Bible for somehow I feel that this is a book to, teach people how to establish a moral philosophy for the society. And I think that's the foundation of a society. And, by giving the knowledge that, okay, this is the oldest Western literature in the world to teach the students who will become the future spiritual leader and the politician. I feel, okay, so that makes sense because this is the book. This is a lesson to teach the opinion leaders in the society. And those people can influence the ordinary people by, deliver those message to the ordinary, because not everybody can get into the school to learn this, so all those educated people or, future politician or, spiritual leaders can learn it from the school. So I feel that it's important. The lesson is teach those people because those people are going to have power or wealth in the future. So this lessons teach those people when they're still young to let them know that, okay, you have to be still humble and respect each other when you get the wealth and when you are powerful. I think this is a really important message to be delivered when they are still students in school, because that mindset can, can be embedded into their mind and can influence their through their lifetime. And also I feel well, as a woman, I feel that it's a little bit disappointed because in this book they still treat women as the property of men, because at 20, let's see, it's a point 20, I think it's 21, they teach a husband that female is the fertile field for their husband, so they still treat women differently, not as the individual. So obviously you can feel that women are not allowed to go to school, so they are just a property in the house, and the only I think the main job is to give birth, so I feel that's it's a little disappointed, but well, this is the way the society was built up 4,000 years ago. So yeah.
So real quick, Cecilia, you bring up an excellent point. So for both of the classes that I'm teaching, we're dealing with this text, and I kind of start all of my classes off with the same material. And I asked them, is there anybody who has a critique of the text? And nobody, they could have been shy, I don't know, but nobody mentioned a critique. And then I asked the women in the class, do any of you guys have a critique? And nobody said anything. So what I tried to bring to the attention is what Cecilia mentioned, right? But before we go too deep into that, let's kind of go back to last week's lecture, right? And there was a portion of the lecture where I had all the women on one slide, right? And I had like that big statue of one of the ancient women pharaohs. And I said that when this is a statue that enters into a temple, and the dimensions of her as the statue are exactly identical to the dimensions of the man or her husband, right? And this is done in a way that shows the equality of both men and women, right? Also, I mentioned Queen Hatshepsut, Queen T, right? So these are all women who were rulers of their periods, their dynasty, etc. So I want bring that up to say that women were going to school, right? Women were in the ancient Kemetic mystery system. They were receiving that knowledge and receiving that information. But is everybody familiar with the term to problematize? Problematization. It's a way of disrupting the normal way of looking at something, right? So one thing I love to do is problematize the notion of American patriotism, right? So by and large, patriotism is looked at as a good thing, right? But also patriotism are the same, the patriots are the same people who were at the Capitol on the 6th of January, right? So looking at patriotism from the lens of those who were at the Capitol problematizes the notion of patriotism, right? So for me, the idea of problematizing is going to be a big theme throughout this course. And all the work that I do, I love to problematize things that we take for granted, right? So what Cecilia is doing is problematizing women's role in the ancient Kemetic society. And the way that she's doing it is through the lens of object and subject, right? And she is spot on in the sense that this text makes women the object and not the subject. Because there's a passage on how a man should treat his wife, but there's no passage on how a woman should treat her husband, right? So the woman is an object, the man remains the subject, right? When he talks about the rulers, they're always framed as men. They're never framed as women, right? So Cecilia is keen on her problematization of what is really the women's role, because if you're gonna write a text that's gonna show you how to be in the world and how to interact with one in the world, and you're writing the women as objective, then how much egalitarian of the society can it be, right? And I don't know, Wilmer, when I kind of jumped into your group, it kind of sounded like you were bringing those problems to the fore as well. I didn't hear the whole conversation, but just from what I heard, it sounded like that was kind of what you were up to also. Did you want to chime in?
Sure. That's exactly what we were kind of covering. And like I feel like a big thing that should be acknowledged before we actually like discuss a lot of these topics is kind of perspective. Because I feel like how these things are interpreted. And I think that was a really good thing that was brought up, because in our group we had two different perspectives to one certain passage. And it's kind of like, especially to passage 21, where it was like, it kind of gives you like, oh, this is how you should treat them and you should keep them happy. And like, that sounds really nice. And maybe I'm just being pessimistic, but to me, it seems like this is kind of like, because it says like kind of keep them from like being able to like seek out other like outside sources of like, I guess. And it kind of like, you maybe see it this way, but it can also be seen this way. So I think a lot of interpretation has to go into it, like how we take it. I don't know if that contributes, but
yeah, absolutely. Let's do this. I know Daniel, you still have to fishbowl also, but I think where we're at is something really important. So I'm going to read the passage, just kind of provide complete context so you guys will know what we're talking about. When you prosper and establish your home, love your wife with a door, then fill her belly and clothe her back, caress her, give her ornaments to soothe her body, fulfill her wishes for as long as you live. She is a fertile field for her husband. Do not be brutal. Good manners will influence her better than force. Do not contend with her in the courts. Keep her from the need to resort to outside powers. Her eye is her storm when she gazes. It is by such treatment that she will be compelled to stay in your house. So go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. Just kind of going along with how the conversation is going. When I read that passage, that's actually the passage I chose.
Okay.
And I completely interpreted it differently, specifically because of that second to last line. Her eye is her storm when she gazes. That's not it. When I read that, that's not something of submissiveness. That's something of power. Her gaze is her strength. She can break you with a look. And it's a matter of, when I read it, it's a matter of respect. This is by such treatment that she will be compelled to stay in your house. That means that she has a choice. She can leave. Inherently in that sentence, she's not bound. She's being compelled to stay. That means she can leave when she wants. There's a level of respect there, societal wise. Maybe, yes, the entire writing is patriarchal in nature. It's always talking about your son, and patriarchy. Like, I think different anthropologists have already theorized that the beginning of patriarchy takes its roots from agriculture. When agriculture comes about, patriarchy comes about. A lot of different discriminations come about due to the imbalance of economical wealth that comes from people like hoarding agriculture. And but this still shows to me a matter of respect years after agriculture has been established. A lot of different societies still treat women worse than this passage would indicate. This passage, even though patriarchy clearly is established, still shows a level of respect that even societies today fail to achieve.
To be honest with you, Daniel, you're spot on, bro. And that's why I wanted to read the passage. And it's not that Wilmer's wrong, right? Like, if you take the entire text within context, I'm kind of inclined to align with Wilmer, right? It's some issues within it there. But upon a close read, what Daniel's saying is absolutely right. They're speaking to the agency of women, right? Essentially saying, men, if you fuck up, this is what can lead to your woman leaving your house, right? It's instructions for the men on how to interact with the women in a way that will keep her happy. And in the chat, it says happy wife, happy life, right? It's the exact same parallel. And really, and to me, along with the passage that Daniel read, is also right in the beginning, right? When you prosper and you establish your home, right? So even that right there is an instructional that's very specified to when you're going to go about this process and how you're going to interact with women at a certain capacity, right? It's not when you're dating. This is not when you're a kid, right? It's when you prosper and when you establish your home, right? So even within that, there's an order to be established, right? So before you think about marrying, there's certain things that need to be aligned for this to work out, right? And this is all, go ahead.
Sorry. So basically work on yourself first before.
Get your shit in order. Yeah, absolutely. Get your shit in order. Because if it's not in order and you're trying to establish a home and you don't have the means to establish a home, she gone. And she's within her right to leave you because your shit ain't in order, right? So it's very specified. And I agree with Daniel wholeheartedly that it does. I think this is the one passage out of all of them that speaks to the agency of women, right? Because if these things aren't handled in the way that Ptah-hotep suggests that we handle them, then the woman has all the right in her power to do what she feels is necessary, right? It's not about you cheating. It's not about any of that, right? It's about you having your things aligned. It's about alignment in order to the way that you choose to present yourself when you seek to interact with women. Daniel, did you want to add anything more to your fishbowl portion?
I guess it was just kind of like the idea of that these multiple of these ideas have followed throughout society centuries later. It's still, a lot of these things are things that we hold in high regard. The very need to be kind to your friends, the need to treat people with respect, to listen to people. It really talks to interpersonal communications. It talks to just how you should be interacting with people. It shows a matter of respect that people should be showing everyone, because I myself full-heartedly believe and agree with that the bare minimum that you as a human deserve, like need to provide to another human, is respect.
Yep.
You might not agree with them, maybe you have a different point, and that's fine. But regardless of that, you should be showing the other person respect. And a lot of these passages call back to that. It was just, okay, let someone speak, listen to them, be quiet, be silent, allow someone to, the other passage, I'm forgetting the number, where it was, if you are one who judges,
Yes,
listen.
completely. Yeah.
Exactly. Or was it the passage commonly associated with the Bible, let he without sin cast the first stone? It's, you should be, no one's perfect. People make mistakes, but you should listen. You should let people talk, communicate. It's society is a society because there's people in it. There's more people. So you need to be able to effectively communicate with them. Is it passage 17?
Yeah, 17. Yep. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right, Daniel. So there's this notion of relation, right? And there's this philosopher, thinker, intellect out of Martinique, Edward Glissant, and he writes what are called poetics. And he has a book that's titled Poetics of Relation. And the whole book is about how relations are formed, how relations are maintained, the importance of relations, right? And this can very well be interpreted as instructions for relation, right? This is all about how we interact with one another, right? That's the central thesis, the central argument, the central problem of this reading is, how do we interact with one another? And I'm going to leave you instructions for wholesome interactions with one another, right? For example, this idea of neter nefer, good speech, right? I cuss, I'm a cusser, right? But to me, there's a difference between cursing and cussing, right? What's the difference?
I feel like the way you're trying to say it is like one is like in like a negative light, and one is just like just talking.
Yeah.
Like if you're like cussing, you're just like, you know, talking bad, like not talking bad, but like you're just like talking, you know, just talking. But if you're cursing, it's like you're cursing at someone, so like you mean to call them like whatever.
What, and you're absolutely right, Ashley. But then even think about a curse. What does a curse do, right? When is a curse invoked, right? I wish harm upon someone, right? That's when you curse someone, is you wish harm, you wish ill things to begot that individual, right? Right. So to me, I hope a house fall on your ass is a lot different than saying, you know, this motherfucker, right? It's different, right? They both have what you call bad words, right? But one is cursing you, right? It's calling forth bad things to happen to you. One is just light language, right? And so what Ptah-hotep is trying to get individuals to do is veer from the cursing of one another, right? Speak truth into one another, speak power into one another, right? Part of spell casting, right, is to write things down. It's not a coincidence that they call things a spell. There's a metaphysical cognitive power that takes place when you go from the process of thinking something to speaking something to writing something, right? For those who study metaphysics, understand that that process leads more to things becoming manifested, for things becoming real, right? The thinking, the speaking, the writing. Anybody get into this idea of the law of attraction? You heard of that? Anybody heard of that? That's essentially what the law of attraction is, right? That's what they teach you, right? You think what you want, you speak what you want, and that what you want will come to you, right? This is essentially what the Kemetics were talking about way back then, before it got new age and it got science of the mind. This is ancient Kemetic teaching, right? You train your mind to think in a way that's positive. You train your mouth to think in a way that's positive. You act in the way that's positive, and then positive things will come to you, right? So just to kind of put it on pause, since what we just went through is a fishbowl. It's not that big of a deal. It's not that strenuous. Cecilia, did you feel stressed out about the fishbowl process?
No, absolutely. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. So if for those who were apprehensive about it, don't be. It's really as simple as that. You could have literally picked up your journal and read from your journal. I would have been fine with that, right? But it's just to get the ball rolling on the conversation and get everyone engaging with one another. Let's shift the conversation a little bit. Oh shit, it's almost time to go. Hold on, time to go here.
10 more minutes.
Yeah, about 10 minutes. Okay. So with the last 10 minutes, I kind of want to get into the conversations you guys had in the breakout groups around what was your affect of your reading? Affect with an A, like how did it make you feel? Were you confused? Were you nervous? Were you enlightened? Did you disagree, right? We kind of already got into a critique a little bit within the conversation of Cecilia and Wilmer in regards to the patriarchy within the reading. But especially for those who have not commented yet, I'm real curious to hear, what was your experience with the reading?
My experience with the reading was like, it just teaches you like to be composed with yourself. And like some of it is talking about like all the evils of the world and how like we fight those evils. But to me, it's just a bunch of like you said, commandments pretty much, and just to live your life on the right track. Yeah, that's my thought process on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone else we haven't heard from.
All those rules or tips, it's just all of them seemed morally correct in my view. Teaches you how to be respectful, selfless, humble, kind. I feel like if everyone followed those rules, it would have been a perfect society. Like nothing would go wrong. Because everyone's doing what they need to do to survive and helping one another. That's how I felt.
Yeah, Brandon, you bring up a good point, and I want to ask this question to the group. What does this text say about the values of the society that produced this text?
It was a good society.
Okay, so what would you say that they value in this society?
They seem like very humble people, in my opinion.
Humility is a value.
They value like respect and like teaching for generations on.
So respect, generational intellectualism, right? So intellectualism from generation to generation, right? Daniel, were you gonna say something?
Sorry, say that again?
I thought you were gonna say something. I saw you come off of mute.
Oh no, I have a mic that goes up and down.
Okay,
So
no worries. So those are some of the values. Go ahead, Cecilia.
I think love and respect will be the major value they try to establish in the ancient society, because they feel like, okay, so everybody, you are not lived as an individual. You have to always deal with relationships. So with dealing the relationship, love them, love each other and respect each other will be the key to succeed, to build up a good society, I think.
Yeah. So let me ask you guys this then, and a juxtaposition. That's another, so two things I'm very big on, right? Problematization and juxtapositions, right? It allows you to be critical. Those are two fundamental tools to be a critical thinker. How can you problematize and how can you juxtapose? So we laid out the values to the Kemetic society. What are the American values? What are our American values? Are y'all American values?
Freedom.
Freedom. Oh, yeah, we say that, but go ahead.
I mean, like the first 10 amendments, right? No.
Yeah. So like, let's speak to it. What are some of those, Brandon?
Like having a right to own a gun, freedom of religion, speech, all that. You know, a
Freedom,
right to a trial.
fair trial. Okay. So those are what's on paper, right? How do those translate to real life? Does everyone get a fair trial in this society?
Nope. You need
Fuck no.
me.
Right? I'm not getting no fair trial. I already know what it is, right? The right to bear arms, right? We all have the right to bear arms, but certain people's opportunity to bear arms, it shows up differently, right? Does everybody know who Philando Castile is? Everybody heard of the name Philando Castile?
Not unfamiliar.
Is it Ainsley? Is that how you pronounce the name? So I saw you shaking your head. You want to kind of mention Fernando Castile, who he was for the course?
I think that he had a gun legally, and I don't want to get him mixed up with somebody else, but I think he had a gun legally, right? And was shot.
Yeah, so he was in Minnesota. He worked for the school district. Minnesota is a concealed carry state, so as long as you have the permit, you could carry your gun with you. He's pulled over in a traffic stop. He tells them, I have a legal right to carry permit. I want to properly put my gun up in a space where it should be, right? And in the midst of him doing that, he was killed, right? So again, he's exercising his Second Amendment right to bear arms. He did it in a way that was lawful, and he's still killed for being posed as a threat. We could revisit January 6th. Some of those individuals were exercising their rights to bear arms, right? I think only one of them was killed, right? And that was more so for trespassing, and it's juxtaposed to their rights to bear arms. So what I'm seeking to draw to your attention is this notion that, yes, we have these values that we place on this paper we call the Constitution, but they don't play out and materialize the same way for everyone. And what I heard in Cecilia's articulation of the values of the Kemetic Society, it was something that was applicable to everyone, right? This is not just for certain segments of our society. This is part of the pedagogy. This is part of what you learn in school, right? We know in our society it does not quite play out that way. So this is what I want you guys to start thinking about. So going forward, next week's reading is Karanga is the author. The title is called Ma'at. I'm gonna pull that up on our Google Classroom site so you guys can see what that looks like. Give me 1 second. And then there's also going to be, I'll discuss this first. There is an actual extra credit opportunity tomorrow around 2:45, 3 o'clock. I'll be doing a guest lecture at Antioch University on anti-racism in the workforce. I'll be posting the link to that either today or tomorrow. As soon as I get the link, I'll make it available to you guys on the Google Classroom site, and I'll also email it to you. But if you attend, you'll get the extra credit. Just write a journal entry for what you observed in the conversation with Antioch University. Again, it's going to be around 2:45, 3 o'clock. As soon as I get the login details, I will provide that for you guys, and that'll be extra credit opportunity.
I had a question.
Sure.
Is it going to be recorded? Because I have a class during that time.
I don't know, because it's through Antioch, so I don't know how they'll be going about the recordings. But keep in mind, it's extra credit, actually. So if you can't make it, no big deal. You're not losing anything. And there will be other opportunities to earn the extra credit. So if you can't make it, it's okay. Let me just show you guys where the reading is, so that way you have access to that, and we'll call it a day. So under classwork. So just real quick while I'm here. So under course lectures, this is where you'll find the recordings for our lecture for the previous class, okay? So under classwork, course lectures, that's where the recordings will be posted. But for the readings, under weeks 1 through 3, Karanga, those are the ones I want you guys to focus on. Look through these as well, but really place your focus on Karanga, Ma'at, Part 1, Karenga Ma'at Part 2, and Karenga Ma'at Part 3. Although they're separated into 3 separate PDFs, that's one reading, okay? So just one journal for the totality of those 3. So you don't have to do 3 separate journals, just one for the Karenga reading.
So we should have read all 4 of them by next week for the reading?
Correct. So by
Okay.
the time we meet next Tuesday, have these 4 read, and that's what we'll be discussing. What I will say about the reading, this I don't think this reading was too difficult to understand. Next reading is going to be a lot more dense, so it's going to require you to spend a little bit more time with the reading. You're going to need your dictionary. It's a lot more philosophical. They really get into this idea of ontology at a very serious level, so this will help give you a deeper understanding of ontology. But what we'll be doing is discussing this idea or this concept of ma'at. Ma'at was mentioned in the reading for today, but we're going to really just unpack this notion of ma'at, and this is where the origins of the 10 Commandments stem from. So for all those who are making your analysis from the Bible, this is literally where Moses, who even the Bible describes as Egyptian or Kemetic, right? This is where he gets the information that produces the 10 Commandments. So give yourself some time to go through it, because it's going to be a mental exercise. I'm not going to front. It's not going to be an easy read, but it's something that you guys will be able to grapple with and deal with. Don't try to understand everything. Understand what you can, and that's what I'm here for, to make everything else make sense, right? But yeah, struggle with it. Don't be afraid to struggle with it. That's part of the process. It's part of the intellectual engagement. But have your tools ready, right? Like have Safari open or whatever your internet browser is. If you gotta look something up, look it up, because it's only gonna add to your understanding. And it also helps build your vocabulary, right? So you can use these really big philosophical, intellectual words. Other than that, is there any other questions you guys have for me? Any comments, concerns, anything? All right, so I will see you guys next Tuesday. If not, I will see you tomorrow for the extra credit. As soon as I get that information, I will make it available to you guys. Be safe, be healthy, be well, get some exercise, drink some water, get some sunshine. It's good for you. Peace.
Later.
Bye.
Thank you.